Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about the Dungeons & Dragons 1983 cartoon, Season 1, Episode 2, Eye of the Beholder. This first released on September 24th, 1983. All right, so as we talk about, first of all, I want to give my review for this. My review is 5 out of 5 stars. Right, this is absolutely fantastic, and I'm really excited about the Dungeons and Dragons cartoons each episode because there's a momentum that's happening. There's something really special that's happening. So basically, at this point, Dungeons and Dragons is 9 years old. It's not even a decade old, and Hollywood has recognized its power, right? And is saying, this is special, right? And we're going to give this a Saturday morning cartoon because they thought this can be really exciting and powerful for young American kids. I think every single Saturday morning, major Saturday morning American cartoon was picked up by multiple nations. And everything that had any kind of, even had 2 or 3 seasons, was usually dubbed into multiple languages, right? So basically, you have this situation where you're seeing an expansion of Dungeons and Dragons. This is a really big deal. You're talking, real juice here, real momentum, right? So what happens? So in this episode, we see Hank the Ranger, Eric the Barbarian, Sheila the Thief. I love that, right? No rogue there. Sheila the Thief. And we see Diana the Acrobat, and we see Bobby the Barbarian, and we see Presto the Magician, and Uni's in the mix. And Dungeon Master is here too, right? So these are our player characters. And we actually have 6, which is larger. Actually, it's really interesting. The player characters, all the young adult player characters, are exactly the number that you would see at a traditional game, right? Which is 5, right? So why is Bobby there? Well, I'm going to tell you this right now because I think some of you remember this, but some of you don't. So in the 80s, Dungeons & Dragons was new. It was really, and people even then had this sense that this was just a world-shattering, changing element of Americana, and that things are going to happen from this, right? And so a lot of teenagers and a lot of college kids started at home playing, right? And it was very kitchen table then, like quite literally your kitchen table, right? E.T. showed the kitchen table, and that was an 80s movie, showed him playing Dungeons and Dragons at the kitchen table, okay? And so you had a lot of kitchen table games. And so you'd have junior high, the game was 12 and up. So junior high kids were playing it, high school kids were playing it, but almost every house, this is very, very different. The 80s America was very different time. There were kids, right? Like, I had a really blessed day. I spent a day in a very affluent, I'll say Media, PA, which is close to where I live, and very affluent area. We saw 2, we spent the whole day in Media just like catching Pokemon, and I caught a Palkia in a raid, and I saw 2 children today. Two, like out of my walk, as me and my buddy were catching Pokemon, we saw 2 kids. We saw no less than 10 times that amount of dogs, right? So, but in the 80s, it was different. People had more than one kid, right? They had a lot of kids, right? And so if you had a D&D kitchen table game going on, you probably had 1 or 2 junior high kids, you had 1 or 2 high school kids, and some mix of that, and then there was always a little kid looking on, saying, can I roll a dice, can I roll up a character, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, wanting to do what their big siblings were doing. And the big siblings are like, did you see the cover of this book? This has a gigantic red devil holding a lady who's missing a bunch of clothes. No, you cannot play. Right? And they were right? You didn't let your siblings in because the game wasn't for under 12, right? And so I think Bobby was there to kind of address this, that a real table was 5 players, but there was always this one sibling who was on the outs, right? And I think Gary Gygax just let everybody, kind of take a break, and in this fantasy world, the little sibling could play, right? Which was something that they could do in a Saturday morning cartoon that they couldn't literally do at the table. Excuse me. Like I said, I was out catching Pokemon all day. Thank you. So basically, you have this situation, and it's going forward. And so basically, in season 1, episode 2, Eye of the Beholder, okay, which came out on September 24th, 1983, the player characters encounter Sir John, and he is a cowardly knight. He's hired by a city to help them slay this monster, the Beholder, right? But he's very cowardly. He's very afraid, and he's not backed up by anybody. And he has a son, right? And his son kind of realizes he's a coward. And it's really, very unusual storyline. But I think the biggest thing here is the player characters have to help an NPC. And that is incredibly Dungeons & Dragons. So what you're seeing here in Dungeons & Dragons is you're seeing Gary Gygax lay down the foundation for Dungeons & Dragons as a Saturday morning 80s cartoon, right? And he's saying, okay, listen, here's the Beholder. The Beholder is a classic Dungeons & Dragons monster. One of the things that's really cool about the Beholder is, like, they don't have any legs. They're just a big ball of flesh with a giant eyeball in the center. And then they have a whole bunch of eye stalks. And the thing that's really neat about a Beholder is it is purely, fundamentally, holy Dungeons & Dragons, right? So, like, if you come across a unicorn in a Dungeons & Dragons game, people were talking about unicorns way before 1974, right? But a Beholder is genuinely Dungeons & Dragons. So, Gary Gygax in the second episode is putting his stamp on the game and saying, this is Dungeons & Dragons, right? And Dungeons & Dragons is unique, and we have our own settings, and we have our own map, we have our own monsters. Now, the reality is he was kind of projecting that. It wasn't a reality. I'm a strong believer that Dungeons & Dragons is really systematized Tolkien. And there's some token monsters here and there to say this is ours. But the reality is it's elf, dwarf, human. And if you squint, man, you ain't going to see nothing but a loader setting, right? But here, you could definitely tell, Gary Gygax has got a lot on his mind. He's got proprietariness, he has this incredible idea that doesn't belong to anybody else, and he wants to make some money with it, right? And he wants to spread the popularity. And frankly, there's very few ways to do that better than a Saturday morning cartoon, man. Like, you're going to sell action figures, you're going to get kids hooked when they're young, right? And we know how powerful nostalgia is. Nostalgia is one of the most powerful forces on the planet, right? And so if you could get kids in early, with Full House, and then sell them Fuller House, as adults, it's real, right? Like, you're talking generations of money. And I think Gary was setting that up then, right? And it worked. I was buying Dungeons & Dragons books in 1982. And I have a daughter who's buying Dungeons & Dragons in 2021, right? So it's very real, right? Now, she buys a lot more or less than me, but the generational money is a very real thing. So the player characters, Hank and Eric and Sheila and Diana and Bobby and Uni all help Sir John. They do defeat the Eye of the Beholder. Just to be clear, the Eye of the Beholder displays some attack modes that are not really fitting of the monster. So that's another thing that they're saying is this is a Saturday morning cartoons, and they're going to take some liberties. Another thing to notice is one of the liberties they took when they were showing this is weapons, man. They were incredibly careful that all of the weapons that the player characters use do not produce blood, right? So Eric the Cavalier, right? He has a shield and literally no sword, right? Which is one of the strangest things in the whole show. You see this Cavalier running around just bashing people with a shield and never gets, a sword. It's kind of crazy, right? Now, the reality is we know today that you could be a perfectly good fighter with just the shield and, in any kind of a fantasy setting. I'm not sure. Actually, the way they showed it, I think you could do it in real life. Right, but if you look at Captain America, that's a dude who has nothing but a shield, but he lays some people out, right? Like, that's very clear. So you have Eric the Cavalier. Hank the Ranger has an energy bow, right? So that's not going to cause any blood. Bobby the Barbarian has a club, right? So that's that's a blunt, blunt weapon, right? And then Diana the acrobat has a quarterstaff, which is works perfectly for her acrobat skill. And then Sheila has no weapon and an invisible cloak, right? And then Presto Magician has his wizard's hat, in which case he can use to cast spells, right? And so one of the things that also comes from this whole Saturday morning cartoon thing is just this really dyed-in-the-wool, like, this is a cartoon and we want to make this accessible to kids. And that's not a small thing, right? There was some pretty crazy stuff, and there was some adult content that was mixed in that was a little, if you looked from the side eye, that you could notice, right? But generally, this show was for kids, and they made it for kids. And I was pretty impressed that they were faithful to that, and I was appreciative of it. So I just, 5 out of 5 stars. I could not be more happy with this episode. It's really fantastic. I just absolutely love it, and I'm actually working my way through the whole series right now. I'm in the middle of second season, and but I'm just so in love with all the characters, so in love with what Gary Gygax accomplished, and I really encourage you. You can watch this stuff on Twitch right now for free. All the episodes are up. It's right on the D&D official Twitch account. Really, really fantastic. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Check it out. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Dungeons & Dragons 1983 cartoon. Some of the things that you noticed when you watched it back then or now. Love to hear. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.